The scent of freshly brewed coffee and new paper filled the air as I stepped into Barnes & Noble with my 6-year-old son, Oliver. It was our Saturday ritual, one peaceful corner of our small life that still felt safe. I never imagined that on this particular morning, the quiet world we had built would shatter in a single breath. Oliver's small hand clutched mine as we walked toward the children's section. He was excited, bouncing on his toes, pointing at a new Dogman book he had been saving his allowance for. His smile was the kind that softened the hardest parts of my heart. For a moment, everything felt warm and familiar, steady, almost normal, until I heard a voice I had once known better than my own. "Caroline?" My spine stiffened. I turned slowly, praying I was wrong. But I wasn't. Blake Hudson stood at the end of the aisle, looking like a polished magazine cover in a tailored charcoal coat, a Rolex glinting at his wrist. And beside him, holding his arm like she owned every inch of him, was Sienna, his new wife. Younger, prettier, glowing in a way that suggested luxury skincare and a life without burdens. My breath caught. For a split second, I forgot how to move. Blake's eyes traveled over me, down to my worn sneakers and thrift store sweater, then to Oliver, clutching his Dogman book like a lifeline. His smile tightened, a mix of surprise, discomfort, and something cruelly satisfied. As if seeing me struggling was a confirmation that leaving had been the right choice. Sienna's gaze sharpened with thinly veiled curiosity. I could almost hear her thoughts. So this is the woman he left.
Before I could swallow the lump in my throat, Oliver tugged my hand and whispered too loudly, "Mommy, that's the man from the picture you hid in the drawer." Every sound in the bookstore seemed to collapse into silence. Blake's smirk vanished. His jaw tightened. Sienna blinked, her fingers freezing on his arm. I opened my mouth, desperate to say something, anything, but my voice refused to come out. My pulse thundered in my ears. I felt exposed, cracked open in the harshest way possible. Then Oliver, sweet, innocent, wounded Oliver, took a step forward and asked with heartbreaking clarity, "Are you the daddy Mommy cried about?" The words sliced the air like broken glass. Blake's face went pale. My knees weakened, and customers nearby turned to look, curiosity mixing with pity. In that single moment, I knew life would never return to the quiet routine we had clung to.
Because what happened next would tear open every wound I had spent years trying to heal. And someone else in that store was watching us. Someone who would change everything. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The bookstore, once warm and familiar, now felt like a spotlight aimed directly at every bruise life had left on me. Blake stood stiffly, pretending my son's question hadn't struck him like a blow. But I saw it. The tightening of his shoulders, the flicker of guilt he tried to bury beneath arrogance. He cleared his throat. "Caroline, you should keep personal matters private, especially around a child." The hypocrisy stung. My lips parted, but before I could speak, Sienna stepped in, her voice soft, sugary, rehearsed. "Sweetheart," she said, crouching a little to face Oliver, "your mommy must have been very tired back then. Adults get emotional sometimes."
"It doesn't mean anything." Oliver frowned, confused. I felt heat rise behind my eyes. I wanted to pull him behind me, shield him from these people who had walked away from us so easily. But Blake wasn't done. He looked at my son with a strange mixture of denial and discomfort, then said quietly, "I think you've mistaken me for someone else." The lie was a dagger. Oliver's little hand tightened around mine, and I felt his body shrink with hurt. Even at 6 years old, he understood rejection. Memories slammed into me like waves. Me, 7 months pregnant, sitting on the cold hardwood floor of our apartment because Blake had taken the bed after a fight. Me begging him to stay when he packed his suitcase without looking back. Me signing divorce papers in a courthouse hallway while he answered work emails. He walked away from us. That was the truth he was now trying to rewrite.
I straightened my spine. Oliver didn't mistake anything, I said, voice trembling but steady enough to stand. You left. Let's not pretend otherwise. Blake's jaw worked. He hated being confronted in public, hated having his perfect image cracked. Sienna rose slowly, slipping her arm through his. We should go, she murmured. It's obvious she's overwhelmed. It was meant to sound sympathetic, but it landed like poison. I turned away, blinking back tears. Come on, Oliver. Let's go pick your book. But Oliver didn't move. Instead, he whispered a question so soft, it nearly broke me. Mommy, why doesn't he want me? My heart shattered. Behind us, I heard a quiet exhale. Someone had been watching. Footsteps approached. A warm, steady voice said, You two don't deserve this. I turned. It was the stranger from the far aisle, the man with calm eyes who had witnessed everything. And his presence would twist our story in ways none of us could have predicted. The man stepped closer, his presence calm, almost grounding, like he carried a piece of quiet the rest of us had forgotten how to hold. He wasn't flashy like Blake. No expensive Rolex, no overly groomed confidence. Just a dark wool coat, a worn leather messenger bag, and steady eyes that didn't look away when things became uncomfortable. He crouched down beside Oliver, careful not to intrude. Hey, buddy, he said gently. Nothing that happened in there was your fault. Grown-ups make mistakes, big ones sometimes. Oliver blinked up at him, his chest trembling with the effort not to cry. Who are you? He whispered. The man offered a small smile. My name's Grant. I was just looking for a book, but I heard what happened. And I'm sorry you had to hear adults say things they shouldn't. I swallowed, unsure how to respond. Strangers didn't usually step into messy moments like this. Most people pretended not to see. But Grant had watched everything. Behind us, Blake scoffed. You don't know anything about this situation. Grant straightened, turning to Blake with a composure so sharp it almost looked like a challenge. I know enough, he said. I know a child asked you a question, and instead of answering, you pretended not to know him. That tells me plenty. Sienna stiffened, her lips tightening. This is between family, she snapped. Grant's expression didn't change. Exactly. And children are family. The words hit Blake harder than expected. He tugged at his sleeve, irritated. Let's go, Sienna. They walked away, but not gracefully. More like they were escaping something they didn't want to confront. When the automatic doors closed behind them, the air finally loosened its grip on my chest. I let out a shaky breath. Thank you, I whispered to Grant. You didn't have to say anything. I know, he replied softly. But sometimes, silence hurts more. There was something in the way he said it, like he understood pain deeply, maybe too well. Oliver tugged my coat. Mommy, can Mr. Grant help us find my book? Grant chuckled. I'd be honored. We walked back into the children's section together. For the first time all morning, Oliver smiled again as they searched the shelves, their voices blending with the soft music overhead. But as I watched Grant's kindness, Something inside me whispered, "People like him don't just appear at random. Not in moments like this." And I couldn't shake the feeling that our paths crossing was no accident at all. We were still in the children's aisle when the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the front of the store. I didn't look up at first, not until I heard a familiar, irritated hiss. "Blake, slow down. You look ridiculous." My heart thudded painfully. They had come back. Grant noticed my shoulders tense and gently stepped in front of Oliver, as if instinctively shielding him. His posture changed, not aggressive, but protective in a way that made the space around us feel safer. Blake marched toward us, jaw tight, eyes darting between Grant and me, like he'd walked into a crime scene instead of a bookstore. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Grant lifted a brow. "Helping a child pick out a book. Why?" "It looked a lot like you were inserting yourself into something that doesn't concern you." "Funny," Grant replied evenly. "I could say the same about you." Sienna caught up, breathless, but still wearing that perfect, glossed smile. "This is unnecessary," she said sweetly. "We just forgot something at the register and saw you were still here, that's all." But the lie slid too easily off her tongue. Her eyes stayed locked on me, assessing, calculating. I could practically feel her peeling apart every thread of my life to find the weakest one. Blake crossed his arms. "Caroline, whatever you think you're doing, it's not a good look, especially dragging strangers into our situation." Something inside me snapped, not loud, but clean, like a thread finally giving way. "Blake," I said quietly, "this stranger showed my son more compassion in 5 minutes than you have in 6 years." His face tightened. Sienna stepped closer, voice dripping with false concern. "Caroline, maybe you should take a moment. You seem emotionally unstable." Grant let out a soft, disbelieving laugh. "That's enough." The temperature in the air shifted. Grant didn't raise his voice, but somehow the weight of his presence grew heavier, steadier, pushing their accusations back where they belonged. "You two need to walk away," he said. "She's protecting her child. Stop trying to turn that into something ugly." Blake opened his mouth, then stopped. Something flickered across his expression. Recognition? Fear? I couldn't tell. But the way he stared at Grant, it was the first moment he seemed unsure. Sienna tugged his sleeve sharply. "Let's go, Blake. She's trying to bait you." They turned away, but not before Blake cast one last confused look at Grant, as if he suddenly realized Grant wasn't just some passerby, as if he had just recognized the name. And that was the first crack in their perfect facade. After Blake and Sienna disappeared behind the shelves, Grant gently handed Oliver the book they'd found together. "Dog Man, 20,000 Fleas Under the Sea." Oliver's face lit up, but his excitement dimmed almost instantly as he looked toward the exit where his father had walked out. "Mommy," he whispered, "did I make him mad?" That question felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I knelt to face him. "Baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You were brave." But Oliver's lip trembled. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Grant crouched beside us. "Hey," he said softly, "the way a grown man reacts has nothing to do with your worth. Nothing." Before I could thank him, a sudden wave of murmurs grew near the cafe area of the bookstore. People were looking at their phones, whispering, glancing toward us. My stomach dropped. Sienna stood near the register, holding her phone high enough for others to see. On the screen was a blurry photo of me kneeling beside Oliver, except the angle made it look like I was yelling at him. The caption she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear felt like acid. "It's just sad," she sighed dramatically. "Some people shouldn't be raising kids alone. Look at this behavior." The air froze. Eyes turned toward me with silent judgment. My heart slammed against my ribs. "That's not—" She took it out of context, my voice cracked. Sienna gave a pitying sigh. "Caroline, sweetheart, if you need help, there are services." Grant stepped forward, his presence turning sharp as steel. "Delete the photo." Sienna blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Grant said calmly. "Take it down, now." Blake reappeared beside her, face flushing with annoyance. "This again? You think you can tell us what to do?" Grant's expression didn't shift. "You're in a public place harassing a mother and child. I'm sure the store manager would love to hear about this. Or better yet," he looked at Blake, voice lowering, "should I call your company's PR department? They might care more than you do." For the first time, I saw fear flicker in Blake's eyes. "How do you know who I work for?" he demanded. Grant didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Sienna like he was staring straight through her. "You have 5 seconds." Sienna's smirk faltered. People started recording, phones lifted, whispers grew. Under pressure, Sienna lowered her phone and hissed, "Fine," before slamming her screen dark. But Grant wasn't done. He motioned to the store manager approaching with concern. "Let's have them escorted out." Blake froze. Sienna's face drained of color.
And just like that, the humiliation they tried to throw at me turned back onto them tenfold. The store manager approached quickly, her expression firm but sympathetic as she glanced between me, Grant, and the couple causing the commotion. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, though it was obvious it wasn't. Grant stepped forward, calm but unwavering. They took a photo of this woman and her child without permission, then attempted to humiliate them publicly. Several people witnessed it. The manager's eyes hardened. "Sir, ma'am, I'll have to ask you to leave the store." Sienna's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious. We're the victims here." Blake gripped her arm a little too tightly. "Sienna, stop." But she wasn't done. She turned toward the small circle of onlookers. "Everyone is overreacting. I was just concerned for the child." Grant's quiet voice sliced through her theatrics. "Concern looks very different from what you just did." Blake exhaled sharply, frustration tightening his features. "Let's just go."
But as they turned to leave, Oliver tugged my hand again, his voice trembling. "Mommy, did we do something wrong?" I swallowed hard. "No, baby. None of this is your fault." And suddenly, something shifted in me. A realization. A breaking point. For years, I had apologized for simply existing. I had walked on eggshells around a man who abandoned his own family. I had carried shame that was never mine to carry. But seeing my son shrink under the weight of Blake's rejection, that was the moment a new fire ignited inside me. I straightened. "Actually," I said loudly enough for Blake to hear, "you owe Oliver an apology." He froze mid-step. Sienna whipped around. "Excuse me?" Grant watched silently, like he knew this moment had been waiting to unfold for years.
I lifted my chin. "He's your son, Blake. He asked you a question. The least you could do is look him in the eye."
Whispers rippled through the store. Blake stiffened. "Not here. This is not the place." "Why?" I asked. "Because there are witnesses? Because this isn't behind closed doors where you get to pretend he doesn't exist?" Color drained from his face. For a long, tense moment, no one spoke. Not Blake, not Sienna, not the manager. But then Blake turned away, cowardly, avoiding his son's gaze entirely, as he walked out of the store with Sienna pulling him faster than before. The moment the doors shut behind them, the air finally softened. Grant placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "You handled that with more strength than you realize." But I didn't feel strong. I felt shaken. Because I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end of the storm. It was only the beginning. The automatic doors slid shut behind Blake and Sienna, leaving behind a strange, heavy quiet. Oliver clung to my hand, his breathing still uneven. I rubbed slow circles on his back, trying to steady both of us. Grant watched us for a moment before speaking. "Are you two okay?" His voice was gentle but carried an underlying firmness, like a man who knew how to stay calm in the middle of storms. I nodded, even though the truth was far more complicated. "We will be." He hesitated, then reached into his messenger bag and pulled out a small, unopened bottle of water. "Here." He looked overwhelmed. Oliver took it slowly. "Thank you," he whispered. Grant offered him a small smile. "Any time, buddy." I couldn't help noticing how natural he was with Oliver. No hesitation, no forced politeness, just kindness. A strange warmth filled the cold corners of my chest. "We should probably head out," I said. "I don't want to cause more attention." Grant shook his head. "You didn't cause anything. They did." But he stepped aside, giving us space as we made our way toward the checkout. I picked up the Dogman book Oliver had chosen and handed it to the cashier. As she scanned it, she leaned in. "That man who stood up for you," she whispered, eyes flicking toward Grant. "We needed more people like him in here today." I offered a weak smile, but didn't look back. Outside, the winter air hit us with a crisp sting. I zipped Oliver's jacket higher around his chin. My heart still felt like a cracked vase, barely holding its shape. Then Grant stepped out of the store behind us. "Caroline." I turned, surprised he remembered my name. I didn't remember telling him. "Listen," he said carefully. "I didn't mean to intrude back there, but what happened wasn't right. And if you ever need someone to stand between you and people like them again, I don't mind being that person." His words caught me off guard. People didn't usually just offer protection, not without wanting something back. "Why?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Because someone once did the same for me, and it changed everything." There it was again, something bruised but honest in his voice. Before I could respond, Oliver tugged my sleeve. "Mommy, can Mr. Grant walk us to the car? It's cold." Grant smiled softly. "I'd be happy to." As we headed across the parking lot together, I felt something shift, something subtle, almost fragile. A sense that this stranger was no stranger to our story at all. The parking lot was quiet, the soft hum of distant traffic blending with the cold air. My Toyota sat under a flickering street lamp, the pale light making it look even older than it was. I unlocked the door, and Oliver climbed into the back seat with his book held tightly to his chest, though now he didn't seem eager to read it. I stood there, my breath fogging in front of me, my hands shaking slightly. Everything inside me felt stretched thin. Anger, humiliation, fear, and something deeper I didn't want to name. Grant paused beside the car but didn't crowd me. He kept a respectful distance, yet his presence felt solid enough to lean on if I needed to. "You don't look okay," he said softly. "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not." The words weren't judgmental. They were simply true. And somehow, hearing them out loud
broke the fragile wall I'd tried to hold up. My vision blurred. I pressed a hand over my mouth, trying to hide the crack in my composure. But it was too late. A sharp sob escaped before I could swallow it down.
My legs weakened, and I leaned against the cold metal door, my body shaking. Grant stepped forward but moved slowly, giving me space, letting me choose. When I didn't pull away, he gently rested a hand on my shoulder. Not gripping, not controlling, just steadying. "Caroline," he murmured. "No one should have to face that alone." I closed my eyes tightly. I don't understand how someone can forget their own child. How he can pretend Oliver doesn't exist. Grant sighed, a sound full of a past he didn't speak about. "Some people erase their mistakes because facing them feels harder than abandoning them." My breath hitched. "But Oliver is not a mistake." "I know," he said immediately. "Anyone with eyes could see that." I covered my face with both hands. I just wanted a quiet day. Just one peaceful Saturday. "That's still allowed," he whispered. "You're allowed to have more good days than bad ones." The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache in a different way. Softer, unfamiliar, almost hopeful. When I finally looked at him, his eyes didn't hold pity, only understanding. "You're stronger than you think, Caroline. Today proved that." I exhaled shakily. "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to feel strong," he replied. "You just have to keep standing." But something in his tone told me he wasn't just encouraging me. He was promising something. And I sensed that our lives were already more intertwined than I realized. I wiped my eyes with the back of my sleeve, drawing in a shaky breath. Oliver sat quietly in the back seat, tracing circles on the cover of his new book. He looked small, far too small for the weight the morning had placed on him. Grant hesitated beside me, his hands in his coat pockets. "If you don't mind," he said gently, "I'll wait here until you two drive out, just to make sure you're safe." I nodded. "Thank you. You've done more than enough." But before either of us moved, a car engine roared behind us. A sleek black Mercedes swerved into the row, stopping abruptly. My stomach twisted. Blake. He got out so fast, the door slammed back against his thigh. His face was flushed with anger, not embarrassment anymore, not guilt, anger. "Caroline," he barked, "we're not done talking." Grant stepped forward immediately, placing himself between us with quiet authority. "Back away, Hudson." Blake ignored him. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You had no right to humiliate me in there, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what that could do to my reputation?" I let out a bitter laugh. "You mean the reputation you protect more fiercely than your own child?" His jaw tightened. "You don't get to twist things like that." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm stating facts." But Blake's fury wasn't aimed at me only. His gaze shifted to Grant, sharp with male jealousy and bruised pride. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" Blake spat. "Some nobody acting like a hero?" Grant didn't flinch. "None of your business." Blake scoffed. "You think you can just insert yourself into my family issues?" Grant took a slow step forward. Even without raising his voice, the air shifted. "Family issues? You walked away from your family. Don't rewrite history because it suits you in a parking lot." Blake's nostrils flared. "Say something like that again, and I'll—" Grant cut him off. "What? You'll leave? You're good at that." The silence that followed was explosive. Blake's face reddened, his fists clenching. He looked like a man on the edge of losing control. I felt Oliver's eyes watching through the window. "Stop," I said firmly. Blake, go home. He looked from me to Grant to the car where Oliver sat. And for the first time, I saw something like fear in his eyes, not of Grant, but of losing whatever control he believed he still had. He took a step back. "This isn't over," he muttered. He got into his Mercedes and sped off, tires screeching. Only when the car disappeared did Grant finally exhale. He turned to me, his voice low. "It's going to get uglier before it gets better." I swallowed hard, because deep down, I knew he was right. This was only the beginning of Blake's unraveling. That night, after I tucked Oliver into bed, I sat at the edge of my small couch, staring at the quiet hum of the refrigerator across the room. The apartment felt too still, too tight, as if the walls were listening to the storm still swirling inside me. I replayed everything: the confrontation in the bookstore, Blake's rage in the parking lot, Grant's steady voice cutting through the chaos. Every moment clung to my skin like cold rain. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but something instinctive told me not to. "Hello?" I answered softly. A pause, then a familiar, controlled voice. "Caroline, it's Blake." My stomach turned to ice. "Why are you calling?" He exhaled sharply, like he'd been pacing. "We need to talk. I didn't handle things well today." "That's an understatement." "I was caught off guard," he snapped, then forced his tone lower. "Look, I want to see Oliver." I closed my eyes. "You had 6 years to want that." He ignored the jab. "Tomorrow, noon. I'll stop by." "No." My voice was steady, surprising even myself. "You don't get to decide when you walk in and out of his life." "This isn't optional, Caroline." "Yes," I said firmly. "It is." Silence crackled on the line. Then Blake's voice softened in a way that set every alarm bell ringing. "Sienna thinks it would be good for my image if I spent time with my son." There it was. The truth, ugly and sharp. "For your image?" I whispered. "Not for him?" His silence confirmed everything. I hung up before he could say another word. A lump lodged in my throat, heavy and painful. Blake didn't suddenly want to be a father. He wanted control. He wanted to save face. And Sienna, she was pulling strings I hadn't even realized were connected. I pressed my palms to my eyes, fighting tears. A soft knock startled me. When I opened the door, Grant stood in the hallway holding a paper bag from a late-night deli down the street. "You didn't eat dinner," he said gently. I blinked. "How did you—" "You looked like someone who wouldn't," he said simply. "I was in the neighborhood." He wasn't. I knew it. He knew it. But somehow, I didn't mind. He stepped inside, setting the bag on the counter. "You okay?" I shook my head. This time, I didn't pretend. Grant didn't touch me, didn't rush me, didn't offer empty comfort. He just stood close enough for me to breathe again. And in that small apartment, with the world closing in, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. But safety, I would soon learn, comes with a price. The next morning arrived far too quickly. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Blake's face twisted with anger. Heard the way he said, "For my image," like Oliver was some PR prop he could dust off when convenient. I was pouring cereal for Oliver when a loud knock rattled the door. My heart jumped.
It's too early, I whispered, stepping in front of Oliver instinctively. Another knock, sharper, impatient. Caroline, open the door. I know you're in there. Blake. I inhaled shakily and cracked the door open just an inch. What do you want? I asked, voice tight. Blake pushed the door wider, forcing his way halfway inside. We're talking about this, today. I stepped in front of him, blocking his view of the kitchen. You don't barge into my home. This is about my son, he snapped. Your son? My laugh came out cold. Now he's your son? Blake looked around, jaw clenching. Where is he? I didn't answer.
But Blake didn't need to. Oliver peeked around the corner. His eyes widened. Mommy? Blake tried to soften his expression. Hey, Oliver. Oliver stepped back, hiding partially behind the wall. Why are you here? Blake swallowed. To see you. For your image? Oliver asked bluntly. I froze. Blake stiffened. What? Oliver looked down at his socks. I heard you last night. Mommy cried. You only want pictures with me so people think you're good. Blake turned to me, fury and humiliation flashing across his face. You told him that? Before I could respond, a voice came from behind Blake. She didn't need to tell him. You did. Blake spun around. Grant stood in the open hallway, hands in his coat pockets, gaze calm but unyielding. My breath caught. Grant? He stepped inside without waiting for permission, positioning himself beside me. Not possessively, protectively. Blake's face reddened. Why are you here? Are you following me? No, Grant said simply. But you showed up yelling at a woman in her doorway. Hard to ignore. Blake's voice cracked. This is my family. You're nothing to them. Grant's expression didn't shift. And yet, I'm the one standing here with them. Something inside Blake snapped. Stay out of this. You don't— I know exactly who you are, Grant interrupted. Blake Hudson, CEO of Atlas Freight Solutions. And I also know your company is under review for multiple employee misconduct claims. Blake blinked. How do you— Grant stepped closer, voice low. You really should be careful who you pick fights with. Blake paled, and in that instant I realized there was far more to Grant Ellington than a kind stranger in a bookstore. Blake stared at Grant as if he'd been slapped. The color drained slowly from his face, leaving only a rigid, brittle anger behind. You think dropping a company name is supposed to scare me? Grant didn't blink. No, the truth usually does that on its own. Blake faltered, just a crack, but enough for me to see fear slip through. I stepped forward, no longer hiding behind Grant's presence. You need to leave, Blake. Whatever this is, I gestured between us. It's not healthy for Oliver. Blake scoffed. Oh, so now you're taking parenting advice from a stranger? Before I could respond, Oliver's small voice broke through the tension. Mommy, I don't like when he yells. My heart tightened. Grant turned slightly, placing himself so Oliver couldn't see Blake's face anymore. He won't yell again, he said calmly. Blake's eyes narrowed. You don't get to speak for me. Grant shrugged. Then prove me wrong. A long, suffocating silence followed. Blake looked around at the apartment he once helped pay for until he left, at the child who bore his eyes, but none of his gentleness, at me, the woman he believed would always stay small enough for him to dismiss. His voice trembled when he spoke again, not with remorse, but with wounded ego. I don't need to prove anything.
I just came to say that I intend to establish a formal visitation schedule, whether you like it or not. My stomach dropped. No, not like this. Not when your motives have nothing to do with Oliver. You don't get to decide my motives, Blake hissed. But your wife does, right? I shot back. Is she the one who told you this would make you look good? He flinched. A direct hit. I pressed on. This isn't about being a father. It's about damage control for your image.
Say it isn't. His silence was the only confession I needed. Grant exhaled slowly. Blake, if you push this, if you make this legal, you're opening doors you're not prepared for.
What doors? Blake snapped. Grant's expression darkened, not threatening, but knowing. The kind that expose what's been buried under your success, and the kind that people like me are very, very familiar with. Blake swallowed hard. For the first time, I saw something raw flash across his face. Fear, yes, but also recognition. As if he was finally piecing together who Grant really was. He stepped back toward the doorway. This isn't over, he murmured. Then he turned and left. The door shut. Grant looked at me, almost apologetically, as if he hated being right. And for the first time since all of this began, I realized Blake wasn't the only one hiding something.
After Blake left, the apartment felt heavier than before, like he had dragged a storm through the doorway and left the thunder behind. I leaned against the kitchen counter, rubbing my temples, trying to steady my breath. Grant watched me quietly, arms folded loosely, as if giving me space to unravel at my own pace. You handled that, he said finally, with a lot more grace than he deserved. I let out a humorless laugh. Grace wasn't the word I was going for. A small smile flickered across his face, warm but thoughtful, like he was weighing something. Caroline, he began carefully, I didn't plan to say anything today, but after what I saw, I can't just stand back and watch this spiral. I looked up, wary. What do you mean? Grant reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. Not flashy, just clean, black embossed lettering. I frowned at the name, Ellington Publishing Group. My breath caught. I thought you said you worked in bookstores, I said softly. I spend a lot of time in them, he replied. But no, I don't work in one. My heart thudded. You own this? Grant nodded gently. My father started it. I expanded it. I stared at him, stunned. The calm man in a wool coat carrying a worn messenger bag was the CEO of one of the biggest publishing groups on the West Coast? Why didn't you say anything? I whispered. Because I didn't want that to be the first thing you knew about me. I swallowed hard, still processing. Okay, so why are you telling me now? Grant inhaled slowly. Because I want to offer you something. Something that might help you create distance from Blake and give Oliver stability he deserves. What kind of offer? I asked, heart pounding. He held my gaze. A job in our children's literature department. Consulting. Story selection. Outreach programs for schools. I blinked. Grant, I'm just a school librarian. You're not just anything, he said. I saw how you talked to your son, how you encourage him to read, how you protect him. That's what children's literature needs. People who understand the emotional weight of stories. My throat tightened. And, he added quietly, it gives you financial security if Blake decides to drag you into court. There it was,
The truth beneath the kindness. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering armor. "Think about it," he said softly. "No pressure." But as he turned to leave, I realized this was the first real lifeline I'd been offered in years, and nothing in my life would ever be the same. For the rest of the day, Grant's offer sat in the back of my mind like a warm ember, glowing, hopeful, almost too good to touch.
But the world has a way of reminding you that hope always comes with shadows. And mine arrived the next morning. I was shelving returned books in the school library when the principal stepped inside, her expression tight. "Caroline, could we talk in my office?" My stomach tightened instantly. "Of course." She closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit. Then she slid her laptop across the desk. On the screen was an anonymous complaint filed against me. My blood ran cold. It accused me of raising my voice at children, neglecting emotional needs, and displaying instability around students. A photo was attached. The same blurred image Sienna had taken in Barnes & Noble. I felt my chest cave inward. This is taken out of context. I want to believe you," the principal said gently. "But the district requires us to investigate any complaint involving a child." "You've always been professional, but—" Her hesitation sliced deeper than the accusation itself. "But you need to suspend me," I whispered. She nodded sadly. "Just temporarily, until things are cleared up." Shock flooded my body like ice water. My job, the one stable thing I had left, was slipping away because of a lie. When I walked out of the building, the winter wind cut through my coat. I couldn't feel my fingers. My legs shook. A teacher passing by glanced at me with confusion, maybe pity. I felt myself shrinking. Again. I made it to my car before the tears came. My breath hitched, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't cry because I lost the job. I cried because Blake and Sienna were willing to drag my life through the mud to get what they wanted. Control. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You should have kept quiet. S." My heart dropped. Sienna. She wasn't just manipulative. She was dangerous. I sat there trembling, staring at her message when another text came through, this time from Grant. "How are you holding up?" My breath shuddered. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to survive another blow. But something told me the storm wasn't done with me yet, and Sienna had just started her war. I sat in the car, Sienna's messages burning through my screen like acid. My hands trembled violently, the world blurring at the edges. I didn't know how much more I could take. Losing my job, being threatened, having my son dragged into a war he never asked for. My phone buzzed again. "Grant. Are you home? I'm coming by." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt too tight, my chest too heavy. But 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my window. I jumped. Grant stood outside my car, concern etched deep on his face. "Caroline, open the door." I cracked the window. "How did you find me?" "You didn't answer. I checked your school. They told me you were gone." His voice was steady, but something in his eyes, anger, worry, protectiveness, shook me harder than the cold air outside. He crouched beside the car. "Caroline, please, open the door." My fingers fumbled for the lock. He slid into the passenger seat, closing the door gently behind him. For a moment he said nothing, just let me breathe uneven, shaky breaths, until I could finally speak. "They suspended me," I whispered, "over that photo.
because of her. His jaw tightened. Show me. I handed him my phone, Sienna's message still glowing on the screen. His expression darkened. She threatened you? It's not just that, I choked. She wants to ruin me.
And Blake is letting her. Grant leaned back, exhaling slowly through his nose. This isn't random. She's escalating. She wants you scared enough to step aside. Step aside from what? I whispered. You, he said quietly. Being any kind of obstacle. My throat tightened. I'm not trying to fight her. You don't have to. She already decided you're the enemy. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I don't know how to protect Oliver from people like them. Grant turned toward me fully, his voice steady but edged with steel. You protect him by not breaking. And you don't have to do it alone. I shook my head. Grant, I don't want pity. This isn't pity, he cut in softly. This is someone who understands what it's like to be targeted by people who think power makes them untouchable. I looked up at him. How would you know that? He held my gaze for a long, heavy moment, and then he said something that sent shockwaves through my spine. Because I've dealt with people worse than Blake and Sienna, and I didn't just survive them. His voice dropped lower. I destroyed them. A chill ran through me, not fear, recognition. Grant Ellington wasn't just kind, he was dangerous in all the right ways. 2 days later, I forced myself to attend Oliver's winter reading showcase at school. I didn't want him to feel the shift inside me, the fear, the exhaustion, the sense that the world was suddenly leaning too hard on our little lives. So I put on a careful smile, held his hand, and walked down the hallway decorated with snowflake cutouts and children's drawings. Mommy, do you think Dad will come? Oliver asked quietly. My feet stopped moving for a second. Sweetheart, I don't know. He nodded with a strange maturity that broke my heart. It's okay. I just wish he liked books like we do. I swallowed hard. Me too. The event was already buzzing with parents. A warm mix of chatter, camera clicks, and the smell of cinnamon from the PTA's cocoa stand. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, we would have a peaceful morning. But peace didn't last long in my world, because the doors opened, and Blake walked in. Not alone. Sienna appeared beside him in a cream coat and red scarf, smiling sweetly at anyone who glanced her way. It was the kind of smile that looked expensive and poisonous. The entire room seemed to shift. Parents murmured, teachers stiffened, and Blake's expression when he spotted me wasn't remorse or hesitation. It was strategy. He walked straight toward us. Oliver's hand tightened around mine. Mommy? It's okay, I whispered. Just stay close. Blake knelt down, pretending warmth. Hey, Oliver. I came to see you read. Oliver didn't move closer. He didn't even smile. Why today? Blake blinked, caught off guard. What? Why only today? Oliver asked. You weren't there before. Sienna stepped in, voice sweet but sharp-edged. Honey, adults get busy. But Oliver shook his head. Mummy is busy too, but she always comes. Blake stood abruptly, embarrassed as several parents glanced over. We're not doing this here, he muttered. Grant would have handled that moment with calm. But Blake... He did what Blake always did when cornered. He attacked. He leaned close to me, voice low and venomous. If you keep turning Oliver against me, I'll make sure you lose custody. I don't care what it takes.
I felt the room tilt. My breath froze. Before I could respond, a teacher tapped the microphone. "Parents, please take your seats.
Our readers are ready." Blake smoothed his jacket, smirked, and walked away. But I couldn't move, because I knew something with chilling certainty. Sienna hadn't just started a war. Blake was now willing to fight one. The reading showcase began with soft applause as the first graders lined up on stage, each holding their favorite book. Oliver stood in the middle, clutching his Dogman copy like it was armor. His eyes scanned the audience until they found me, and he relaxed just a little. I smiled, even though my heart was still raw from Blake's whispered threat. One by one, the children stepped up to the microphone. The room warmed with laughter and pride. But when Oliver's turn came, something shifted. A hush fell over the space as he walked to the mic, feet small but steps steady. He opened his book, but instead of reading, he looked up, right at Blake.
"My book is about being brave," he began, voice soft but clear.
"My mommy reads to me every night. She helps me not feel scared." Parents smiled, teachers nodded, but Oliver wasn't done. "And sometimes," he continued, "grown-ups make you scared, even when they say they love you." My breath caught. Blake stiffened in his seat. Oliver swallowed, lips trembling, but he didn't stop. He didn't hide. "Sometimes they leave, and sometimes they pretend like they don't know you. And sometimes," his voice cracked, "sometimes they make your mommy cry." A ripple of stunned silence swept through the room. My chest ached so fiercely, I had to grip the armrest. Oliver blinked hard and whispered into the microphone. "I don't want a dad who gets mad when I talk. I want someone like my mommy. Someone who stays." Gasps echoed around us. Blake shot up from his seat. "Oliver, stop!" But it was too late.
Oliver lowered the book, his voice breaking.
"I don't want a dad who left us."
The room froze. A teacher hurried forward, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, guiding him back to the line of children. The applause that followed was hesitant, emotional, uneven, because no one knew whether to comfort or cry. Blake looked around the room at the staring parents, the whispering teachers, the judgment, the truth he could no longer hide from, and something inside him cracked visibly. Not anger, humiliation. Sienna leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but Blake didn't seem to hear her. His eyes were fixed on Oliver, wide, shaking, stunned. He looked like a man watching his entire image, carefully crafted and ruthlessly protected, burned to ashes right in front of him. And as Oliver returned to the stage, wiping his eyes but standing tall, I realized my son hadn't just spoken his truth. He had broken the last piece of Blake Hudson's control. The showcase ended in a strange, trembling silence. Parents stood awkwardly, unsure whether to offer sympathy or pretend nothing had happened. Teachers whispered in tight circles. And Blake sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles whitened. Sienna tugged his sleeve. "Blake, let's go. People are staring." But he didn't move. I hurried toward the stage where Oliver waited, shoulders shaking, trying hard not to cry. When he saw me, he burst into sobs and threw his arms around my waist. "I'm sorry, Mommy," he cried. "I didn't mean to make trouble." "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, pressing kisses to his hair. "You didn't make trouble. You told the truth, and I'm proud of you." I meant every word. But when I turned, Blake was suddenly standing just a few feet away. His expression was unreadable. Shame, anger, confusion,
regret, all twisted into something raw and unpolished. "I need to talk to him," Blake said hoarsely. I stepped back. "Not now." Sienna scoffed. "Caroline, stop being dramatic. Let him—" But she never finished the sentence, because another voice cut through the air, deep, steady, impossible to ignore. She said no. Grant. He walked into the multi-purpose room with calm purpose, dressed in a charcoal overcoat, his expression controlled but unmistakably protective. Some parents recognized him. A few whispered. A few glanced at Blake with something close to pity. Grant approached us without rushing. "Caroline, Oliver, are you two okay?" Oliver nodded weakly, rubbing his eyes. I tried to speak, but emotions stole my breath. Blake turned toward Grant, fury rising again. "You don't belong here." Grant stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough. "I'm here because your behavior made a 6-year-old feel unsafe. Someone needed to step in. You clearly weren't going to." Blake's face crumpled, offended, defensive, humiliated all at once. "He's my son." "Then act like it," Grant said simply. The room fell silent. Even the children stopped fidgeting. For a moment, Blake looked like he might explode. But instead, he deflated, chin trembling, eyes shifting anywhere but toward the son who had just exposed his truth to the world. Sienna crossed her arms, disgust curling her lip. "Let's go, Blake. This is pathetic." But Blake didn't follow her. He stood there, shaken, hollow, undone. And that was the moment I understood something clearly. Grant wasn't taking over the situation. He was standing where a father should have stood. After the showcase ended, parents filed out in uneasy clusters. Some offered sympathetic smiles. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Blake stood motionless near the back of the room, as if the truth Oliver spoke had nailed his shoes to the floor. Sienna hovered beside him, whispering sharp instructions, her hand gripping his arm hard enough to leave marks. I held Oliver close, rubbing slow circles on his back. His breathing had steadied, but his eyes were still glossy, too much emotion for a child to carry. Grant waited beside us, posture relaxed but alert, a silent wall between us and whatever Blake might attempt next. Finally, Blake stepped forward, but he didn't approach me. He approached Oliver. He knelt. Parents who hadn't yet left paused near the doorway, sensing something significant was happening. "Oliver," Blake said, voice catching. I heard what you said." Oliver looked up, cautious. "I didn't lie." "I know," Blake whispered. The room tightened around them. Blake swallowed hard, his voice trembling with a type of honesty I hadn't heard in years. "I made a lot of mistakes. I hurt your mom. I hurt you. More than I ever meant to." Oliver's brow furrowed. "Then why did you leave us?" The question hit harder than any accusation. Blake's shoulders slumped. "Because I was selfish and scared and stupid." I felt my breath hitch. Blake had never admitted fault to anyone, not even himself. Sienna, horrified, grabbed his arm. "Blake, get up. Stop humiliating yourself." He didn't move. He stayed kneeling, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. "I can't fix the past," Blake said, voice rasping. "But I want to try, if you let me." Oliver studied him, a child trying to understand an apology 6 years overdue. "Are you sorry?" Oliver whispered. "Yes," Blake said, his voice cracking. "More than you know." The silence that followed was thick with shock. Then Oliver said something that felt like a quiet earthquake. "I forgive you, but I don't want to live with you. I want to live with Mommy." Blake closed his eyes, devastated. Sienna's voice sliced through the air. "Blake, get up. We're leaving." He finally rose, looking smaller, older, stripped of every polished layer he'd built around himself. He glanced at me once, regret etched into the lines around his eyes. But I didn't speak, because forgiveness wasn't mine to hand out. As he walked out, Sienna storming behind him, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The power he'd held for years, gone, broken by the truth of a 6-year-old boy. And now nothing stood between me and the life waiting on the other side. After the showcase emptied out, I carried Oliver to the car. He fell asleep on my shoulder before we even reached the parking lot, drained but finally unburdened. I laid him gently in his seat, brushed his hair off his forehead, and kissed his cheek. "He's brave," a quiet voice said behind me. I turned. Grant stood under the winter sun, watching us with that steady calm that had carried me through more storms than he knew. I shut the car door softly and faced him. "He shouldn't have had to be," I whispered. "No," Grant agreed. "But he was. And you were, too." For the first time in days, something warm cracked through my chest. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel chased. I didn't feel small. I felt free. Maybe Blake's collapse wasn't justice. Maybe it wasn't closure. But Oliver's truth, spoken in front of the entire room, had lifted a weight from my shoulders that I'd been carrying alone for too many years. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Grant took a slow step closer. "Now, you stop surviving and start living." I let out a shaky laugh. "That sounds harder." "Then you let people help," he replied gently. "Let me help." I met his eyes, warm, steady, without pity, without judgment. Not a savior, not a fixer. Just a man who had shown up every time the world tried to knock me down. "About that job offer," I said softly. Grant smiled. "Say the word, and the position is yours." "I accept." It wasn't desperation. It wasn't fear. It was choosing a future where Oliver and I were safe, supported, seen. Grant exhaled, relieved. "Good. Then there's one more thing." My heart skipped. He opened his coat, pulled out a small hardcover book, the kind used for special editions. But this one was blank, pure white, no title. "That's for you," he said. "A new story. Your story. You've earned a better one." My eyes burned. "Grant." He reached out, brushing a tear from my cheek with his thumb. The touch was soft, intentional, full of promise. "You don't have to decide anything today," he murmured. "But when you're ready, I'd like to be part of that story." Something settled inside me. Not fear, not doubt. Peace. A future. I nodded. And for the first time in years, the path ahead didn't feel heavy. It felt open, bright. Ours. As Grant walked me to the car and the winter sun warmed my back, I realized this wasn't a second chance life handed me. It was the one I finally chose. So that's it. Our story finally comes to an end. And if you're still here, watching until this very moment, then something in this journey must have touched your heart in a way only life can explain. Maybe you saw a piece of yourself in Caroline's strength. Maybe you felt Oliver's courage. Or maybe you recognized that healing doesn't come from winning every battle, but from choosing yourself again and again. You know, the Stoics used to say, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that's exactly what we witnessed. Pain didn't break them. People didn't define them. They learned to stand firm, like Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind adapts and turns obstacles into fuel." If this story whispered anything to you, let it be this. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. And you deserve a life built on truth, not fear. And if you felt even the smallest spark of strength or comfort through this journey, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe so we can keep walking these stories together. Because you're not alone, and your new chapter might begin right here. Just a quick reminder, my friends, this story is a work of fiction created purely for emotional reflection and personal growth. Any resemblance to real people or events is completely coincidental. Our goal is to explore healing, courage, and the choices we make in difficult moments, not to represent real individuals or real-life claims. These stories are crafted to offer comfort, inspiration, and a safe space to think about our own lives with compassion. Thank you for understanding and for being here, truly.